Good evening, everyone. This is episode 15 of Tatami Room, The Office Experience. I'm your host, Martin. Let's get started. I hope y'all had a good week this week. Things have been challenging on my end, but we're working through it. So this week, I wanted to talk about kind of what the Japanese office experience is like, what a Japanese office salaryman position looks like. And so my kind of insight into this is that while I am a teacher and so I spend quite a bit of time at school, I'm also, I start and end my day at the city hall, which is a proper work environment. I would say. So I do have a little purview into this Japanese work culture as well, so I'm going to share kind of my thoughts on it, my thoughts about my quasi-salaryman experience. The Stoic quote for this week is, "While we wait for life, life passes." And this one's also by Seneca. I do want to correct one thing. Last episode, I think I said that so one of the tobus for plane, I believe, I said that the way that you say it, or the part of plane that it is the ko, but if I'm correct, it is the heat. So when hikoki is plane, the heat part is what corresponds to the tobu. This is from last week's word of the week. Just wanted to kind of correct that. And that being said, let's jump right into the daily life section. Alright, welcome back everyone. Let's get started with the daily life section. So I want to preface this by saying that working here in Japan as a teacher, as an ALT, is my first quote job, my first full-time position, and so that kind of may taint my experience while I'm talking about kind of work culture here in Japan. Some things that maybe I think are strict may just be kind of regular work norms. I gotta get used to this transition from college where you can saunter into a lecture whenever you want to, or talk to your professor, get an extension whenever you want, if the professor is nice. But it's the real world out here, so maybe that's just on me. But let's get started. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is how the Japanese workplace is very prim and proper. It's all about manners and appearance, and this appearance is generalizable to everywhere as well as work. So, for example, cleaning the school. Kids clean the school on most days. It's a 15-minute cleaning period. I'm a fan of it. I think it's great. Keeps the school a little bit cleaner, and it promotes a sense of community and ownership of this is our school. But what it does not do is deep clean the school, right? And so I think a lot of the cleaning is like, oh, well, we did the cleaning and the school's clean now. It's like, dude, you're not going to have a miracle happen in 15 minutes of cleaning a day, right? The school's big, there's a lot of dust and whatnot, and so while it kind of keeps things in check, cleaning for a little bit every day, I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say that the school is now, sparkling clean after that. But yeah, so everything's all about appearance. And an example that is more related to work is people, they'll show up, very early, or they'll stay late for work. It's like, oh, well, they're working so hard. And so one time I asked my supervisor, I didn't really ask him, I just kind of commented, wow, this guy at the office, so-and-so, they're hardest worker. Whenever I come in, they're always there after I leave. They sometimes come in on the weekends, just hats off to them. They must be the hardest workers out there. And he just kind of laughed and responded with, well, yeah, but they take a long time doing things. And I think that's one thing that you can do is you want to show everyone how you're the hardest worker and whatnot, but nobody can do like an inhuman amount of work, right? You 10 hours doing 10 hours, 12 hours, just turn into a zombie, right? But a way that you can kind of bypass that and still show like, oh, you're going above and beyond is, do a very menial task, and just basically stay on it for a while. No one's gonna, be looking at your computer screen to see if you've typed and retyped the same email like 15 times over. It's like, no, you're at your desk, you're typing away. I don't know if things do get that extreme where, you're just writing and deleting this email over and over again. One of my friends did say that they actually saw one of their coworkers doing this once. Personally, I haven't seen it at my office yet, but I honestly don't think it's that far from the truth. Keeping with, prim and proper, I also want to talk about the attire. So for teachers, it's a little bit different. The teachers I work with, I've seen them wear shorts and athletic wear. Shorts, not so much, but, kind of like joggers or sweats. Athletic wear is definitely okay. And one time I was inspired by this, and then I was sort of reminded of my precarious position between a salaryman and a teacher. So my supervisor kind of pulled me to the side. I'm wearing a long sleeve t-shirt, and some sweatpants, kind of athletic wear, and he's like, hey, so other teachers do wear this, but you come into the office, you start and end at the office every day, so gonna need to have you go home and change, which that was sort of a pretty embarrassing experience for me, because I'm like, I didn't know. I saw what the other teachers were wearing, and I was like, well, this is okay. And also based off of the sort of description from my predecessors that I had received, I was like, I think this is fine. Like, this is a little bit more athletic than usual, but it should be okay. Anyway, appearance is very important, especially at the office. You're going to be seeing lots of suits and ties. So when I was younger, right, my father, he still works in tech, but he works in tech on the West Coast. I think West Coast is more renowned for having a sort of more laid-back, tech vibe to it. And so my father never went into work in like a tank top and whatnot, but his work attire was definitely more relaxed than like, Wall Street full business suit and whatnot. And so I grew up around that, and not just from my father, but people on the West Coast. Like, I feel like the work attire, maybe I've just been around too many tech people. It's not very uptight. Is what I'm trying to get at. So that is definitely kind of not the same. In Japan, it's a lot more uptight. There are some people at the office who have to kind of get up and move around, go visit certain places in the city, and so they're allowed sort of a more lax dress code. But, office workers I see, you're going to be wearing a full button-up collared shirt, and you should make sure that, that shirt is tucked in, or else. I've seen sometimes, once or twice, shirts not tucked in, but like 99% of the time, it's tucked in, wearing jeans and slacks. Prim and proper. Next kind of section I want to talk about is time. Now, this might be a workplace thing, and obviously you don't want to be late even in the US, but here everything must be on time, if not earlier. If you listened to last week's episode, I talked about me getting in a little bit of trouble for coming down 4 minutes early from my hotel room instead of 5 minutes early. I think that had more to do with my supervisor having to wait a bit for me. To be fair, I was eating breakfast, and we had agreed on 8, and I still came down at 7:56. But that just, shows the point that time is of the essence, and if you're not there 5 minutes before, you're late. On time is 5 minutes before. And I think maybe that's just me having to adjust to, workplace life. Again, like I mentioned, lectures, you could just kind of walk in whenever. But I think in Japan they do tend to be more strict about it than even they would be in an American workplace. You know, there's times that I've had to catch the ferry, and the last ferry leaves around like 4:30, which is right about when my work ends. But you need to be there like 15-30 minutes before. And so one time I asked my supervisor, I'm like, hey, is it possible for me to just catch this ferry? It's at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, there's typically not much work for me to be done. All my lectures, not lectures, I'm not a professor, all my classes get done by that point. So usually it's just I'm either studying Japanese or doing prep for another lesson. There's not much. It's almost, you could even call it garbage time. But I was like, hey, maybe I'll come in like 30 minutes early or leave 15 minutes later one day. Can we do a little deal here? But no, I had to use 1/7 of paid day off, so I had to use my Nenkyu, which I get it. It's fair. It's like you can't be skipping out on work and whatnot. But at the same time, I don't understand why we couldn't just like, hey, this time I'll go 30 minutes early. Next time I'll stay 30 minutes later. I'm still doing the same work, and I'm not really like disrupting the flow or whatnot. But so time is of the essence over here. Next, I wanted to talk about the system. So this is kind of a little bit of an abstract section, but what I wanted to convey was that there is a sort of procedure in place for everything. And what I mean is that there's kind of a handbook, a manual system for everything, and I mean everything, even ALTs, and these procedures kind of must be followed, right? It's a little weird for me to think that, I'm a person and whatnot, living, breathing thing, and I have a sort of user manual, right? And every job has like a job description and what you're supposed to be doing, but I think for ALTs there's even like a specific, like, how do you handle an ALT, which maybe it's a little bit weirder to say it than it actually is, but yeah, again, kind of illustrates that lots of manuals, lots of procedures. And this goes without mentioning that, or this just, again, further, another point I'm trying to make is that because there's this system, there's going to be a lot of paperwork. I mentioned in one of the previous episodes that Japan hasn't, at least in the workplace, adapted to cloud technology and file sharing and whatnot, Google Drive, and so there's still a lot of paper. And because there's these procedures and every step must be kind of followed, hoops have to be jumped through, that's going to leave a massive paper trail. And so, yeah, like I said, my office still looks like an episode, or the set of The Office at times. Lots of kind of documents, binders just lying around everywhere. One second. What I also wanted to mention was that, within this system, or the systems that are in place, there's a chain of command, right? And so usually if I have to ask for something, if I want to request something, that's going to go up the chain of command. For example, if I want to request paid time off, I'm going to first talk to my supervisor, take out my little booklet, write in my booklet when, how much, etc., stamp that, give it to the section chief, the kakaricho. He's going to look over it. He's going to use his ink on the little stamp. Boom, boom, boom. He's going to hand it over then to the kacho. So that's the head chief. And then he's going to, boom, boom, boom. And that's how, it's very like step by step by step. And, that's just for asking or requesting a paid, time off. Not submitting a form, not just being like, hey, I'm gonna be gone these days, or hey, I need to take out like PTO for these days. Very procedural. Well, this process for me, or these processes, some of them I found like pretty frustrating. Like, this is so much slower, or I have a better idea. Why don't we do this way? These processes may seem slow or tedious, but they work. And they have been working in Japan. So it's kind of like two sides where, these processes, these procedures have been in place for a long time. Japan loves to adhere to these procedures, and so they haven't changed, which is good in the sense that people know them, they've been working, but at the same time, there's definitely some that could use some revision. There could be a little bit more revision for some of them. So, yeah. I want to conclude the daily life section with some interesting facts about the workplace. First, let's say that first I want to say that there's no sick days, not really in Japan in the office. So as an ALT, I have access to sick days, but otherwise, if in another job, you have to use your paid time off for a sick day, which is kind of interesting to me. I will actually have to use paid time off for a doctor's appointment that I have coming up, just because it's an appointment, and it's not like I got sick and I'm so sick I can't come into work. Which contrast that, I feel like in Seattle, you call in and to your boss like, hey, I got a doctor's appointment, can't make it into work today. I'm pretty sure that's you don't have to take out vacation days for that. Sometimes, if you do have like paid or not paid but sick days, the company can be quite invasive about it. They can even ask like, hey, what was the reason? Like, what illness did you have, and where were you during your illness? Which is a little weird. It can be a little invasive. You're dealing with a certain illness you don't really necessarily want people to know, or at least your bosses to know. Yeah. The next thing, after not really any sick days, is that the fall guy in Japan is at the top. So in the U.S., I feel like if there's wrongdoing in the company, the blame gets shifted down, from the CEO. It's like, no, it wasn't the CEO, it was some random like section chief that messed up somewhere down the line. I've been following the Sam Bankman-Fried trial a little bit, and he tried to kind of shift blame onto one of his subordinates for the collapse of the crypto exchange FTX. It didn't really work, but that is kind of the way it is. Versus here in Japan, my impression, which has been confirmed by multiple people I've talked to, is that if someone the company messes up, someone in the middle messes up on the bottom, the blame gets shifted upward. So it's not like the small guy's fault, it's the supervisor. Why didn't they do a better job of supervising? And this can be kind of seen with my parking violation a couple weeks ago, where it's not me who got in trouble, it's like the blame went up. Like, my supervisor got a phone call, and potentially people above him got an angry phone call, or got told off, like, oh, why is the ALT parking here? It's like, no, it's not my fault. It's like, oh, it's the supervisor's fault. And one interesting thing that I learned is potentially my supervisor told me off more harshly than was maybe appropriate for the parking violation, was that maybe it cuts into his bonus, right? It shows like, oh, well, he's not taking care of his subordinates well, so no bonus for you. And so then it kind of makes sense that the little agitated talking to the newbie, like, hey, why the hell are you parking in in the company's parking lot? But yeah, so if I think if someone messes up on the bottom, the blame gets shifted up, and then blame goes up, and you'll be hearing a lot of like, "Moshiwakenai this," like, there's no excuse for this. Again, going back to the whole manners point, you'll be hearing all the profuse apologies and whatnot. The other thing I wanted to mention, or another thing I wanted to mention, is that the company is responsible for you. Again, I'm going to use my parking violation as an example, but it wasn't me that got a ticket. It wasn't like me that was called, informed that I was doing something wrong. It was my company, and like I said, it went up the chain, up the system, up the chain of command, right? And so it's weird for me that I don't have like less personal responsibility and more of like group responsibility, or this kind of like, the company's your daddy kind of vibe. And this isn't just for companies, it's weird kind of for schools as well, where if a kid gets in trouble, right, it's not their parents that are called, right? It's the school that gets called, and it's like, hey, your student is misbehaving and whatnot, which is, again, for me, that is virtually like I can't even fathom that. But I guess it makes sense given that for a parking violation it's the company that gets called, and I assume for other violations and whatnot as well, it's like it's not my it's not me that would get informed or whatever, but it's like, okay, no, we're gonna talk to his company, talk to his bosses, and inform them that their employee is messing up. So that's kind of interesting, this kind of paternal responsibility. And finally, the last interesting thing I want to say, mention, is I just called this cycling, and I don't mean bikes, I mean kind of interdepartment cycling. This is the same with teachers. So teachers, every 3 to 5 years, they switch to a different school. So that's why you'll have teachers from Kagoshima City. A lot of my coworkers, my teachers who I work with, are from Kagoshima City, and they'll end up in Nishinomote, which is not ideal because their families will be living in Kagoshima City. One of the teachers I was talking to, it was a little sad. She was like, "Oh, I'm so lonely. My kids are in Kagoshima City, and I don't get to see them too often because I'm here on Tanegashima teaching." I think that's kind of interesting that teachers rotate every 3 to 5 years, but I think it's the same with office workers as well. At least at the city hall where I'm working, if I'm not mistaken, my supervisor was mentioning that they will be rotating to another department next year. I'm not entirely sure like where he's going to be placed, or maybe he's just accepting a different role in the department. But I think there is this kind of like rotation among bosses and employees. You get transferred to different roles and whatnot. I don't know if that's good or bad. I think it's a little weird because by the time you start getting good at your job, by the time, for example, my supervisor starts understanding like, what does an ALT need? How do I really handle an ALT? It's like, okay, new job for you, new responsibilities. I guess maybe it keeps things fresh and also makes sure that kind of people don't, cling to the same positions, and there's new faces around. I don't know, not entirely sure about that, but that's also something that I thought I'd share with y'all. I find pretty interesting that you don't. It's not like you're a programmer and you're going to be in this role. It's like, you're an employee of the company and you might get shifted to a different department if, every 3 to 5 years. So that's kind of an interesting fact. Anyway, let's cut to the outro section. No current events this week. So yeah, see you in a bit. Alright, welcome back. Thank you all for making it this far into the show. Let's finish things off with the word and the stat of the week. So the word of the week is chin suru, or chin. So suru is just kind of the to-do verb that you add to the end of a lot of words to kind of verbify them, so to speak. And chin is just kind of the sound that a microwave made when it was done warming food up back in the day. And so the meaning of chin suru, or chin shimasu, is to warm things up informally. So if you're at the convenience store, the person, if you buy a lunch or a bento, they'll be like asking like "Atatame ka," which is like, should I warm this up for you? But if you're just talking to a friend, then you can say like "chin shimasu ka." I learned this from some of my coworkers. I was chatting with some teachers when on a Friday, and I learned it, so I thought it was kind of interesting. I think in Japanese you'll have quite a few words that are like a sound, and then you can add the suru verb or the to do part, and verbify the sound, which that's what they did with chin. Like, so chin shite would be like warm it up, informally. I thought that was kind of funny. The stat of the week is 500 yen, and that's about the price of a pack of tomatoes, about 4 tomatoes, at my local supermarket. It was a little bit lower, than 500, 487 if I recall correctly. But the reason I went with 500 is because 500 is typically the price of a bento, or a lunch that has rice, meat, and some veggies as well. So that's like those 500 yen bentos. They're a proper meal, versus basically the same price for 4 tomatoes. I'm not sure why the tomatoes are so expensive, or in the sense that, is it because I'm on an island, or is it just tomatoes are more expensive in Japan in general? But I thought that was really interesting, really kind of unique that tomatoes are, I guess, so expensive compared to other things. And one kind of, I guess, I'll share this as well, is that it's not just tomatoes, but other fruits. So some fruits that can be grown here on the island locally aren't very expensive, but if you're trying to buy like melons and even apples sometimes, those can get pretty pricey, to where like they'll cost more than the meat. Some of them will get up to fetch about a good like $10 ish, which, first of all, the dollar is quite strong right now, and second, it's like $10 purchasing power, or 15 about 1,500 yen that's a pretty hefty sum. Like, to 3,000 yen, that's a very proper meal at that. You're going to an izakaya with 3,000 yen. And that if you're buying 2 good melons, that could also be 3,000 sometimes. So yeah, fruit, and certain kind of vegetables that have to be imported from afar can be quite expensive here. In any case, thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode. I apologize if I rambled a little bit. I think I did. It's a little late, and it's the start of a week, but it's been a long couple days. Please consider subscribing. It would really mean a lot. I will see you all next week. Per aspera ad astra. Peace and love, everyone.